How confident are you that the new remediation action plan will deliver for the residents that you've been campaigning with?
I'm not at all confident, to be blunt. I'm sure officials are patting themselves on the back for announcing a target date of 2029. That's still 5 years, 5 long years away. It's only for some buildings, the high-rise buildings that are in grant funding schemes that were first known in 2020. I think the target date is essentially meaningless to most people, really. People really want to know for their homes, whatever height it is, when it will be made safe. And just simply having a high-level date of 2029 for some buildings just won't mean anything. There's still too many issues. There's still too many barriers. There's no consistency of risk assessment. A lot of the issues that they've shared with the government for years, leasehold and residents have shared and told the governments about for years, just aren't being addressed. So whether it's non-qualifying leaseholders, non-cladding defects, shared owners as well, under 11-metre buildings where there's a case-by-case approach that has failed, I don't know how I can be confident in a plan when the actual issues and the barriers to remediation haven't been addressed. So, I could expand upon non-cladding defects, etc., and a range of other things, but I appreciate time is tight. I could probably be here for a few hours if you let me talk too much.
Are there some things that you would have liked to see included on that plan that would give you more confidence?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think the starting point is that we've always said this is a collective state and industry failure. Successive governments of all stripes have deregulated, ignored warnings, industry bad practice across the sector, but leasehold and residents are still the ones that are paying for all this. So there needs to be a firmer grip, and that grip could quite easily be done by a lot of the machinery that's in place right now, which, in our view, we think the Homes and Cladding Safe Scheme is ideally placed to do that as a single front end for leaseholders and residents, working with the Leasehold Advisory Service, working with the government, the Building Safety Regulator, local regulators, and just joining it all up. So that's probably the first thing that I need, that we need a single version of truth for all unsafe buildings that require remediation. Because right now you've got regulators, local regulators, they can't enforce on the developer contract. You've got resident management companies where they're forced to put in a waking watch. The developer is not obliged to pay for that. How do we actually work all this? So there's too much buck passing, there's too much blame games going around. We still don't have a solution for non-cladding defects at group level. We've shared that many buildings with the Building Safety Fund over the years with the officials saying, look at these issues, what can you do about this? These are holding up remediation. These fire safety defects, these variations, latent defects. We've got a lot of buildings that have been moved from one list to completed when they've still got issues. I know plenty of those. We shared them in August with the Building Safety Fund, but we don't know what policy's been developed from it. We don't know what guidance has been developed from it. So we need just a fresh approach, but using what's in place right now and not having the victims of this crisis, whether non-qualifying leaseholders, whether shared owners, whether people in under 11-metre buildings were ruled out of all help, putting them at the heart of the process, putting them at the centre, making the change we need, and then you accelerate remediation, because you'll have got rid of the barriers, you'll have got rid of the pain, the suffering, the harm that's being caused right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grover. That's a helpful introduction.
I just think you ought to be congratulated, you and your colleagues, for the campaign you've run ever since the Grenfell disaster.
Thank you.
Really highlighted this, not merely exposed it as an issue it needs dealing with, but have put forward some very practical and real suggestions about how it should be dealt with. So I think we'll put that on the record at the beginning. So in terms of the barriers, which has been mentioned in answer to Joe Powell, so is it down to money at the end of the day? If we have more money, would the barriers be solved? Or is it just not enough money in total, or is it the money doesn't deal with certain problems that remain that need to be addressed?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think that the money is always the thing that everyone focuses on, but as we've said for a long time, the issue is that because of the deregulation, because of the lack of real oversight of what was being built, because of the weak national standards, Class O fire spread that's now been withdrawn, it's now up to the government to provide that certainty, because right now you've got fire risk appraisal external walls, so subjective. You could put 15 fire engineers in a room with a FRU and they'd all come up with a different opinion. So the government needs to provide that certainty of risk assessments for all buildings, all heights, all defects, inside and outside, and then you can actually focus on the size of the problem. Because that certainty, whether it's a Home Office, the fire safety and purpose-built blocks of flats guidance, it's been delayed for years, whether it's almost we need a like a PAS for the internal standards. We've been told one would come out in April 2025 from the BSI. Now that's October 2025, so that's your starting point. And then it's a case of simplifying everything. Because right now, leaseholds and residents, they're literally pillar to post. Have I got a developer? Is it a freeholder? Do I go to the government? Is it a housing association? Who do I speak to? You get that single front in. And then we talk about the money. And then we've got billions out there already. You know, those billions, 5.1 billion in 2020 and 2021, that won't go as far now. We've still got residential property developer tax that hasn't been hypothecated. But you need to get more money from industry, because that's what the government said all along. If it's the industry that's faults with it, alongside successive governments, which we'll keep saying, then the leasehold and innocent residents should be protected. And you can extend the duration of the building safety levy. You can have more product manufacturers. Who knows if they'll ever be held to account. As you well know, social housing, your questions in Parliament last year. Contractors as well. Contractors are currently engaged in lengthy disputes, as Rees will no doubt say, with each and every housing association.
The Select Committee in the last Parliament recommended we should have something called a comprehensive building safety fund, where the government took responsibility for the totality of the problem and then itself sought to get the resources in from different players. In other words, it took the weight of responsibility off leaseholders and others. Would that have been a different way of approaching it?
It would be the most sensible way of approaching it. It's what we formed our campaign and reflected those asks, because it's just simple and it's actually doing the right thing. Because this government keeps saying industry, regulators, everyone else do the right thing. This new government now needs to do the right thing where the old government didn't do. So the major developers, they've signed a contract. They're not really getting on with the work. They'll blame the freeholders. The freeholders blame the developers. It's all minimising the work to make everything tolerable, which means people won't feel safe and will still be stuck paying huge insurance. A lot of the developers haven't even been made to sign the pledge, so that's why I think they should still contribute to the building safety levy. I get the point that no other parties are, that David will soon make, no doubt, but that's where they need to extend it. So there's a lot more developers that need to do the work and repay the funds, but I get the point that, you know, they shouldn't be the only ones paying, because they were always the lowest hanging fruit, the old government. Contractors are already speaking to us and saying they'd rather pay into levy, perhaps selfish self-interest, but their contracting body, Build UK, has made representation to the Treasury saying that we'd just rather have simplicity rather than just lawyers getting rich, because that's what's happening right now, while the delays at people's homes being made safe continue. Sorry.
I want to talk about the Remediation Code of Practice and your thoughts of, is it making a difference on the ground?
Not really, no. It's took a long time coming. We fed into a lot of the iterations with it. The very last minute it was heavily revised, and one of the key things that was taken out was having routes to compliance, having routes to recourse, to know where to go if the contractor, the resident liaison officer, isn't doing what they need to on site. We saw the fire in Dagenham, Spectrum building in August, over the bank holiday in August 2024, and that's probably the first serious demonstration of what happens when residents living on a building site, there's not enough care about the safety of it. I've seen, I'm the sort of guy who walks around a lot and looks at these buildings and looks at scaffolding and sees the fact that it looks like timber, it looks like fire could spread. So we've got, that is the most serious case of it, but whether it's the lack of communication that takes place, whether it's seeing buildings still going up with monarflex, people not really knowing where they can go to next. We wanted it to be made law, the government pushed back upon that. We've been through, fed their feedback lots of times. We thought it'd be updated since July 2023, including on decanting, rehousing and best practice, but now we've seen that developers agreeing to it, but we still don't know how it's going to be enforced really. So it's not working yet. It could work, it should work, but the amount of contracts I've spoken to who don't even know it exists, that's not helpful. Might be one or two positive examples. I was at one of these feedback sessions with MHCLG, and everyone joined the call just kept saying, yeah, we're adhering to it. But where's the, they're checking that's happening. I've seen lots of visits from officials, MHCLG, everyone to buildings that have done it well. When I ask them for, have you understood what's happened there, it's like, oh, we haven't done that yet. And I speak to residents and leaseholders, and they just say, it was a bit of a jolly for them, really. So it's about learning, making things better. I'm hopeful it'll happen, but we're still the developers, they're going to agree to abide by it, but is that mandatory? Is it advisory? I don't think we'll see consistency on the ground unless there's real oversight of it, and that's where Homes England would come in again, because they've got stipulated communication points, run all those buildings through the schemes, make sure there's oversight. visible oversight and grip. It'd be a wonderful thing.
Giles is saying, and what David Rees is saying, there's a definite disconnect between it. And to my mind, it seems to be on action rather than words. It seems to be that what I'm hearing is that the industry is signing up to it, and the industry is ticking the box. But it's whether it's taking that tick and moving into actually doing what's needed to be done. I wonder if we've got time. I just wonder if Giles wants the last
that's the reality. That's the reality, that leaseholders and residents are facing all these struggles, have nowhere to turn to, and not really getting any answers. But all we hear from the government, industry, housing associations, everyone is, we're abiding by it. I understand we are. I think we are. We probably are. So let me just check. Whereas actually on the ground, no. The amount of buildings where the scaffolding just goes up, and that's the first thing you know about it, or monarflex goes up that you can't see through. So we really need to understand whether they're all abiding by it, but someone needs to actually be overseeing that and making sure it happens. Sorry, I'm a bit angry about this. Thank you.
Very helpful indeed.
Can I just take the opportunity to say thank you to Giles for his efforts, along with others, on campaigning. I represent Barking constituency, and your description of what leaseholders or residents in all sorts of tenure are having to experience is very accurate, particularly when it comes to remediation work. Because there is example after example, including Academy Centre in my constituency, who are, after many years, still waiting for works to be completed. Really a sense of urgency on behalf of those residents who I represent, who others represent, but actually who campaigners are speaking on behalf of too. Mr Grosvenor, I think you might want to add, and then I'll leave it there.
If I could, please. Sorry, there's a lot of things I want to add, but I'll try to be very quick. The Building Safety Regulator, the timescales issues of the MHCLG legislation, which caused a lot of pain on the ground for providing information, key building registrations within a 6-month time frame. So leasehold and residents are impacted with that. The BSR, we've met them a number of times. They initially said it's developers and their designers that need to improve their drawings. They then admitted that, hang on a minute, actually we're under-resourced, we've got IT issues, so there's a lot of other issues there as well. They didn't want to get into the culture that was prevalent for the last 30, 40 years of saying, okay, very cosy, incestuous some would say, of saying do this, do that. But there does need to be learning, there does need to be best practice. They said they'll be at business as usual by March 2025, so we're hopeful we'll start to see that happen and funding take place. There was a couple of other bits just in terms of the developers. Yes, we've now seen a breakthrough. We've still got a bit of, I think Academy Central's an RTM. We've still got a problem where there's a resident management company and freeholders. They're starting to give those access licences now, but they're still disputing throughs. There's still a lack of consistency, and that's the deadlock that's not been broken, because I've got dozens of examples of that happening, and the government hasn't really intervened, hasn't given any oversight. It goes into some caseworkers. We met with Michael Gove on 6th September 2023. He said he'd do more caseworkers, but no one can see what's going on. I will stop now. Thank you. I've got more.
No, I understand. We all understand.
Oh, fire engineers. Sorry.
We all understand on behalf of your residents your extreme frustration. We feel the same frustration, I can assure you.
Very, very quickly, our campaign position is that social housing providers should have equal access to funds. As you say, it's so they make homes decent, but they also need to treat shared owners with decency and sublet, allow them to sell.
Very briefly, and I mean one sentence, because we're well over time.
I'd like to ask the officials that are coming up what they're going to do about the recent news of the suspension of fire engineer Tri-Fire and the devastation that's wrought in the market. 20% of buildings that people don't know whether those assessments are accurate or not, and they've known about it for 3 or 4 years. This government has. I've got a lot more, but fine. Okay.
Well,